Welcome back as we continue on day one of our America's Future Series Defense Innovation Summit. I'm Scott Murray. David Hamilton, the the founder of the America's Future Series over a decade ago. As we continue on here, and we're going to move forward. And do you want to welcome in our next?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yes?
Thank you again, Scott, for emceeing, and thanks for media.
We also want to thank Bell, because they are our title sponsor today and again tomorrow. Don't forget, this is a 2-day, so we certainly hope that you'll join us the rest of today, but also come back on the 28th of April, coming up tomorrow, and day 2 of our America Future Series Defense Innovation Summit.
And invite your friends.
Absolutely.
And speaking of friends, we'd like to bring Mitch Johnson back. Mitch, who is on our board of advisors and helps coordinate and organize these events with us. He's done a great deal of work on this one, has in the past, back in October, very instrumental in putting those together. Runs a tight ship, so I know he likes to get started on time. I'll just say thank you, Mitch, and we're going to turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be back. Hey, for folks in the audience who weren't on board at the start, I'm Mitch Johnson with Curtis Process Consulting. If I may, just a few words carrying over from our past panel. I am both encouraged and comforted by the collaboration that's being displayed so far through this morning, in particular between the U.S. and the U.K. David, it kind of brings to mind a mantra of special guest tomorrow, Secretary Gertz, stronger together. Really resonates with me. So folks, look forward to joining tomorrow when we honor Secretary Gertz. And now it's my privilege to welcome aboard Major General Lee Levy. Lee, are you with us?
I am present and accounted for, I believe. So yes.
Outstanding, sir. It's always good to see you. For folks, this is not my first opportunity to work with General Levy. And General Levy, let me just say it's been a pleasure getting to know you better over the past year. Speaking of getting to know people, you're fairly well acquainted with most of the folks on this upcoming panel, right?
To say that it's a cast of rock stars would be a bit of an understatement. They're all rock stars. I know them personally and professionally, and we're very fortunate, very fortunate to have them with us today.
Well, and I can say knowing this and having had the genuine pleasure of getting to know each of these panelists better throughout the last couple of months of prep, you might say that this session has been much anticipated and is special for me. So I'm looking forward to getting this thing going. Folks, this is the theme and title, this panel's theme and discussion point is technology and partnerships for affordable capabilities of the future. So I'm going to, if I may, I'm going to offer a quick introduction of General Levy, and then I'm going to yield the floor to him. So Major General Lee Levy, President and CEO of the Levy Group. As a retired Air Force General Officer, Lee Levy brings over 34 years of distinguished military service, as well as unparalleled global leadership experience in national and international security. Additionally, General Levy serves on the NASA Advisory Council, the NAC, as an appointee by the NASA administrator. The NAC is the senior external advisory body to the administrator on program and policy matters related to the U.S. space program. Additionally, General Levy has also been appointed by the governor of Oklahoma as a member of the Oklahoma Aerospace and Autonomous Systems Council. General Levy, it's a pleasure to turn the mic over to you as moderator, sir. Over.
Well, thanks a ton, Mitch. That's nobody cares about my bio, but what they will absolutely care about are the 4 folks that we have teed up with us today. And so we're very fortunate to have just some incredible talent. And I look forward to, frankly, teasing out some questions, maybe poking around the edges a little bit and seeing where the conversation takes us. For those of you who don't know, we have an incredible body of incredible former senior leaders in our Air Force and in industry. And I'll step through a little bit of their bios for the folks at home that may not know them. And if you don't, hopefully you'll get to know them a little bit better. And then we'll move straight into the questions. In no particular order or in any particular order, Lieutenant General Tom Sharpy, he's the Deputy Chief of Staff for Capability Development, NATO Allied Command Transformation, and the DCS for Capability Development and NATO Supreme Allied Command Transformation in Norfolk. In this role, he's responsible for developing operational and strategic capability requirements on behalf of 30 NATO nations. Great to have you with us, Tom. Good to see you, Sharps. Next, the Honorable Erin C. Conotan, former Undersecretary of the Air Force. Are you with us there, Erin? Good to see you. As the under, she served for the under in the Air Force and the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness during the Obama administration. Prior to that, she was staff director of the House Armed Services Committee, and she's now a senior advisor at Ancura, where she builds strategies to help a variety of companies work more effectively with both executive and legislative branches. It's great to see you, and thanks for making the time to join us today. Shep, I see Shep in my Hollywood Squares. He's my upper right corner on the Hollywood Squares this morning. And we have Lieutenant General Steve Shepro, U.S. Air Force retired, and he's Vice President, Global Sales and Marketing, Fixed Wing Systems for Boeing Defense, Space and Security. And so he's the VP Global BD over Fixed Wing Systems for Boeing Defense, Space and Security, a former NATO Deputy Chairman and Air Force fighter pilot with 35 years of experience. He's also a teaching fellow at SMU's Tower Center for Public Policy and International Affairs, a NATO senior mentor, member of the Council of Foreign Relations, and a board member of the Olmsted Foundation. So Steve, great to have you with us this morning. You're looking fine and fit. And then rounding out our all-star panel is Major General Marshall Dillon, Air Force retired, Director of Business Development at Aurora Flight Sciences, which is a Boeing company. Director of ISR BD for Aurora Flight Sciences. Prior to joining Aurora in 2021, he was a defense leadership and education consultant. Mark retired in 2017 after 33 years as Vice Commander of Pacific Air Forces. Tough gig there, I might add, right? Beautiful Hawaii. And Deputy Joint Force Air Component Commander for U.S. Indo-PACOM at Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam, Hawaii. So Marshall, it's great to see you again. Glad to have you with us. Okay, so before we get started, a couple of simple ground rules. All of us like to have our ROE, our rules of engagement, before we enter the fray, as we say. So before we do this, the way I'm going to cue this up is I'll ask each panelist a question, and then they'll get to offer their response, about 3 minutes. And then we'll open things up for a little bit of crosstalk amongst panelists, if you don't mind. And then I've got maybe a question or two that I'll call it the wild card round if we get to that, and we'll see where that takes us. There are no bonus prizes awarded for that, only bonus intellectual property content that the audience will be the beneficiary of. So we're set to go 2 rounds with our panelists, and then we'll see what we have at the end for either the wild card round and or closing remarks. So in the lottery, Lieutenant General Sharpy, you have emerged first for question number 1. So that's right. Prize goes to you for being the first one out of the chute. So General Sharpy, in late 2020, the Air Force Chief of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, issued an action order pertaining to the, quote, need to identify systems and programs that are outdated and or unaffordable to make way for capabilities that will make us competitive in the future high-end fight, end quote. From a NATO perspective, from your NATO foxhole, what do you see as the biggest obstacles to replacing some of those outdated capabilities? And if they are replaced, what do you see those challenges looking like?
Yeah, hey, thanks. First of all, the rock stars, I'm probably the low member on the totem pole when it comes to that status, but I'm glad to be here. Good to see my friends. Thanks for hosting. Thanks for the opportunity. First of all, one of the things, and I think General Brown's words are fantastic. The challenge is what works for a nation or works for a service. At NATO, it's a little challenging because you have consensus at 30. And so you got to keep that in the context as I try and answer the question. In NATO, the capabilities are provided, the majority of the capabilities that are afforded for the alliance are provided by nations and they use them to protect their sovereignty. And so what they bring to the fight, our challenge is to ensure that we connect them, that they're interoperable, so that the sum of the whole is greater than the individual parts. That's the challenge of delivering capabilities for sovereignty and then to use it at the alliance level. And so that becomes a challenge because we have from 0 Gen to 5th Gen in some of those capabilities with some of our nations. And then our job is to make sure that all of them are able to be used together, and to replace some of those legacy systems is a lot harder, because that might be the best that some of the nations have. So we work with them and we use them, and we're able to provide options and maintain that interoperability for the alliance. Our acquisition process, I think I'll say the obvious, but it's slow, it's challenging, because you need, as we struggle with it in the US side, imagine that same process, multiply that by 30, and then you have the consensus challenge. That means everybody has to say yes. It only takes one no to prevent progress. And so it's a challenge, but again, I also sense opportunity in that. And so we're working with that to try and ensure that we provide those future systems that we need to have and try to replace some of those legacy systems. I'll take it as an opportunity. Getting down to the brass tacks in this world, this competitive environment that we find ourselves in, data and digitalization of the battlefield, getting the data policies, the sharing, and it comes down to trust, right, within those 30 nations, and they'll share the treasures of their nations with their soldiers, sailors, airmen, marines, and guardians. But data is something that we're trying to struggle with to get them to share that, and we're working to try and figure out how to do that. And it all comes down to what I said at the beginning: interoperability. How do we make 30 individual member nations into an alliance? And that's ensuring that the capabilities that they bring to the table every day can be used for the alliance. And again, many opportunities there. As I said, from Gen 0 to Gen 5, our job is to make sure that they can connect and they can be effective, and that strength of the alliance is the alliance. So I'll stop there so I don't get voted off the island for time.
That's right. We don't want to have to do that so early in this round. But great answer. Great to see you. And I think all of us on this video have all worked in the NATO environment, and it's uniquely challenging, but also uniquely rewarding in that we have such a great alliance that has endured for so many years and has brought so much capability and so much improvement in the lives of so many citizens that it's beyond almost the political alliance piece to the societal changing alliance. And I don't think that oftentimes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Haley, you're right. I mean, we've had 71 years of the alliance and relative peace and stability in Europe, and that it's founded on the relationship of the principles of the alliance, and it is the greatest alliance in the history of the world. Is it perfect? No, but guess what? It's the best that we have, and it's because of the individual member nations and getting to yes, and how can we, and not just stopping at no, we can't. And so it is an honor to be a part of it. It's a noble cause, and it what brings me to work every day with a smile most of the time.
I know that feeling. But that's the nature of the work we do, particularly when in the alliance arena, where it's one part military art and one part statecraft. And I would say for those of us that have worked in the NATO arena or in any alliance arena, it was probably a good lesson in statecraft for all of us, something we probably didn't get in our traditional upbringing in the military way of life. So thanks for what you're doing to lead that. And I very much appreciate you bringing up the concept of data sharing. We've, I think, all collectively grown very comfortable with hardware sharing, whatever that looks like, the interoperability piece, or at least sharing the notion of data sharing and how we do that and how we do it effectively and how we do it in a time frame that makes a difference in the speed of the modern fight is work yet to be done. So thanks for your leadership on that. Very much appreciate it. Secretary Conotan, Erin, it's great to see you. You are next on the Wheel of Fortune here, as it were.
I'll try to live up to General Sharpy's excellent opening remarks.
Okay, outstanding. So General Sharpy sort of alluded to the current process acquisition, and we could probably just do several hours on that alone. And policies, data, we could do a couple hours on that too. As some of the challenges that really lie in front of us in terms of how we would implement the kind of necessary, but equally as much affordable capabilities, which, in this environment, affordability, I think is one of those words that we all are centered on. I'd really like you to share your thoughts with us on how we create the fiscal flexibility required to design and field the future force we need, particularly given the fact that Congress has a very large voice in how that happens, when it happens, and how frequently it happens.
Sure. And, forgive me if I bounce between my different backgrounds, having come from Congress and from the Air Force, and now from working with a bunch of defense innovators of both large companies and small. And I realize we have an audience of innovators who come with their own experience here. And let me just say at the outset, it's really wonderful to see so many former colleagues here. And one of the things as a political appointee that is wonderful is that, it was 10 to, 7 years ago that I was with the Air Force, and to see people who were at lower ranks back then ascend to greatness and ascend to places where they are helping to lead our Air Force and are out helping to lead some of the most important prime contractors is just a thrill for me. So gentlemen, it's really just a pleasure to be with you. I can flash back to 2001 when I joined the Hill. I can flash back to 2010 when I joined the Air Force as undersecretary, and reflect on some of these same conversations. Back then, the conversations were more about retiring old metal to make way for new metal. So I really appreciate the conversation about data, because I think that we're not just talking about retiring the A-10 to make sure that we can afford the F-35. We're talking now about making sure that we can get legacy data systems out to make sure that we can afford the capabilities that not only the United States needs, but that are interoperable with our NATO partners. So I think that this conversation about software, and if people want to go down the road in the back and forth about software as a service or how we think about buying it, we can certainly do that. But whether we're talking about the Air Force traditional side or the new Space Force, because I know we've got that expertise here on the panel, I think that the data policy side is incredibly important. But I think having a chief come in and put down this marker about affordability and about policy changes, I think is important. And we'll see who the new secretary is. But my guess is whomever that person is also going to put down similar markers, just because the nature of our defense budget is going to be flat. The president's already, sent that message. And so we have to look for cost savings wherever we can find them. And I don't know how many people have been tracking what the current chairman of my old committee, Chairman Adam Smith from the House Armed Services Committee, has been saying, but he's been really talking about making way for the capabilities of the future. And he has explicitly been talking about software as part of that conversation, not excluding the hardware component of it, but talking about building incentives in from the front end so that there's an opportunity to yield savings on the back end, and so that the government can, on a regular basis, enhance and refresh its capabilities and are not constantly in renegotiations. So obviously that gets into sensitive issues like intellectual property rights and issues that are very important on both sides, to the government and to the contractor in question. But I think he's laid down some very interesting issues that I think will be at play in this round of congressional conversations. And I think, anytime that you have a new entity inside the government, we saw this when the Congress created new acquisition authority for Special Operations Command. And certainly now that there's a Space Force, there is an opportunity to relook at acquisition authorities and then potentially to apply them to our more traditional soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. So while I wasn't necessarily all in on certain aspects of the Space Force, I do think now that it's in creation, There's a lot of opportunity here to look at it from an innovative perspective, particularly from an acquisition and policy perspective, to get at some of these issues that the chief is talking about. So I realize Space Force has its own chief, but I think there's some synergy here that we can get to. And like General Sharpy, I'm going to leave it there for now and perhaps come back to some of this in the crosstalk. So thank you very much, Lee, for getting us teed up.
Absolutely. And thank you. And maybe if time allows, we can have the conversation with your kind of the congressional hat on about hardware retirements and how that funds or doesn't fund the kinds of modernizations, and how we get sort of in this do loop where we want to retire but can't retire, whether it's to buy new hardware, software, or the acquisition system, which is designed to buy hardware. And I've said frequently, we have an industrial age acquisition system for an industrial age acquisition Air Force, or industrial hardware Air Force and DoD. What we really need is an acquisition system for a digital Air Force and a digital DoD. And we're trying to apply those industrial age processes and policies to a digital age universe. And it's definitely pounding the square peg in the round hole sometimes, from getting capabilities that we need deployed and at a time frame that makes them operationally relevant to the warfighters.
I'm happy to.
Great, thank you. Steve Shepro, Lieutenant General Shepro. It's good to see you, Shep. You're next on the conversation. You're looking well. Glad to have you with us today. Continuing with the theme of needing to identify systems and programs that are outdated and are unaffordable, so we can make capabilities that will make us competitive in the future high-end fight, the Chief's words. I'd really like to hear from your perspective what actions Boeing has taken to support this push to get us to a more agile and lethal warfighting force. And Boeing is well known for innovations and advanced technologies and collaboration models. And to any extent that you could share some of that with us, I know the audience would really be grateful.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. First of all, it's great to see you. And speaking of digital age, can I get a communications check from you? How do you hear me?
I've got you 5 by.
Okay, that sounds great. No, it's great to see old friends and colleagues be part of this great panel. And, it's interesting listening to Sharp and Secretary Conotan discuss the crux of innovation is change, right? Innovation is a word that we throw around a lot, but you really need to change. And you could hear it in the vocabulary. Both Sharp and Erin brought up things like the digital age. And we hear about the kill chain is now the kill network, and distributed control and affordable mass, and the need for networked and attritables. And all of that really takes change of thinking, as you've been getting at, Lee. And as Erin said, it's at the heart of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force's mantra of having to accelerate change or lose. And so I think Boeing's been really leaning into this. I would say, to paraphrase Churchill, when you have less cash, you think more. And so Boeing, of course, has a big global network to draw upon, not only globally in the physical sense around the world, but has commercial and space and many other all domain areas that it can coordinate and collaborate. And that's what we're doing a lot more of. So look at last year's Air Force Association's Airspace and Cyber Conference last September. So the Boeing T7 was showcased, and it was rebaptized the ET7. And why is that? Because the digital transformation starts with being able to digitally engineer and make a digital twin. So you don't have to go through these legacy manufacturing techniques and designs and upgrades, where you could do it rapidly and quickly with a digital twin. And of course, the T7 is amazing. I mean, I'm sitting right above the factory here, and when you go in there, you barely hear a rivet sound, right? The advanced manufacturing that's been migrated from the commercial side and from the advanced programs into it is truly remarkable to see. And you see this migrated now into the new F-15EX, into supporting what the Joint Warfighter is focused on, and that is Joint All-Domain Command and Control. Of course, the Air Force is part of that, is the Air Battle Management System. And you've recently seen the KC-46 tanker identified as one of the first recipients of the important node that will help connect all of those dots so you can actually do JADC2. And so I'd say the company, to answer your question, has just begun to coordinate a lot more and to really lean in to where we could be agile. And it's all about agility, right? To borrow Dr. Roper's digital trinity. It's all about the ability to have open mission system architecture and to have agile software, and that allows rapid technology insertion. So in something like the F-15EX or even the B-52, we could rapidly upgrade the technology to bring in hypersonics and to bring in hypersonic weapons and to bring in that important piece of increased range that will get at that kill chain. And of course, doing it with, like Sharp said, an eye on interoperability and doing it with partners and allies, but definitely across our joint services. So I'll stop there, but I will say that innovation and collaboration has been at the heart of where Boeing is going. And again, you've seen that showcased in the past, and that's where you'll see the company going in the future. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Steve. So what you humbly left out was Boeing's ability to look back down the supply chain and innovate as well, right? We always think of Boeing innovating with whether it's hypersonics or software or SLS or KC-46, or you pick the capability. But I think it's important for our audience to understand that in modern great power competition, national security capabilities are applied not just at the pointy end of something like an airplane or some other combat system, but they also go backwards down into the supply chain and the manufacturing chain and all of those things that create the industrial mass that results in an airplane or a rocket or what have you. And Boeing has been a thought leader and an innovator in that for years. I mean, your point about the silent factory floor, I think, should make anybody who thinks about how we assemble things or have assembled them in the past, that should give them pause, but also a great sense of pride that Boeing is bringing those real innovative technologies and capabilities to manufacturing, because that's what gives us the sustainable combat capability and sustainable edge in time going forward. So hats off to you and the Boeing team for that. Next up is Major General retired Mark Dillon. Marshal, it's good to see you. I appreciate you being here with us today. So as I mentioned in the intro to the audience, Mark works at Aurora Flight Sciences, which is a Boeing, one of the Boeing family of companies. A little more specifically, what has Aurora Flight Sciences done to support a more agile and lethal warfighting force? Right, we think about building things, but we live in a software-driven world, and be interested to hear some thoughts from you on that.
Absolutely, Lee. Thanks for the opportunity. Honored to be here with the distinguished panel, and we'll jump right into it. Just a quick background about Aurora Flight Sciences. Yes, we're part of the Boeing team, joined the team about 3 years ago. We've been around since 1989. About 45% of the folks that work at Aurora have either STEM or STEM-based degrees. And our employees have applied for and received over 100 patents in this short time, and have designed or flown over 70 unique aircraft and systems. So to answer your question, I think Aurora really adds to the nation's agility and its lethality offerings in a couple of different ways. First, I'll talk a little bit about innovation. Next, talk a little bit about advanced aircraft manufacturing technologies. And then finally, about some improved collaboration models, and I'll share one of those. I think Tom will like the last one especially. So first on innovation. A few years ago, we took a basic 4-seat twin turbo prop general aviation aircraft, Diamond 42, and we turned it into what's now called an optionally piloted aircraft, where you can operate it in one of three modes. You can fly it fully manned. You can fly it in national airspace that has some restrictions in a hybrid mode with the computer basically flying the airplane and with a safety pilot sitting on board, or you can fly it in the fully unmanned mode. We call that aircraft the Centaur. And of course, those, you remember your Greek mythology, centaurs are half human, half horse. The team also added an integrated ISR systems into the aircraft for our customers. And although we've developed Centaur as an ISR product, what we've discovered along the way is that it's extremely useful for low-cost autonomy flight testing and development. And so we've leveraged it as a surrogate flight test platform for multiple manned and unmanned teaming events, not only for Air Force Research Lab, Naval Air, Office of Naval Research, but also for OSD. The bottom line is that Centaur's innovation as a great ISR platform also supports the early development of autonomy, artificial intelligence, and machine learning in the air domain. Secondly, I'll talk a little bit about advanced aircraft technologies. For those of you that don't know, Aurora has two modern state-of-the-art aircraft manufacturing facilities, one in Mississippi and one in West Virginia. In these two facilities, modern robotics and flexible tooling actually allows the production team to run multiple programs on the same line on the same day. And this advanced technology allows Aurora really to rapidly produce advanced lightweight composite aerostructures like those used on the MQ-25 and produce at commercial prices while being responsible to the rapid Department of Defense 21st century needs. And so last, let me just talk a little bit about collaboration. And as I mentioned, Sharps, I think you'll like this one. For the past 18 months, Aurora's been part of a bigger Boeing group, and this group is called the Integrated Remote Sensing of the Arctic-Antarctic Development Group, or IDG for short. This is a diverse and collaborative group between Boeing and several Arctic nations, many of which are NATO partners. And they're focused on solving some of the toughest communication, surveillance, and reconnaissance challenges ever present, as we know, in the Arctic regions. And the IDG's first multinational demo will take place in Andøya, Norway this August. So really excited to be part of that international event with our NATO teammates. In summary, I'd say Aurora's innovative use of current technology, plus advanced manufacturing and new and collaboration and innovation models really will help define America's more agile and lethality in any high-end fight, whether that fight is today or tomorrow. And I'll pause there and look forward to participating further on in the group.
Thanks, Marshall. So the theme of change, nothing happens till something changes, right? So part of this, perhaps for all of us to think about, is how do we collectively, as senior leaders, former senior leaders, influencers, and national security thinkers, how do we drive up the pace of change, or maybe said a different way, how do we drive up the pace of adoption of change inside of the national security apparatus, right? I hear things like what all of you described in terms of innovation and technology, and one could make the argument that innovation isn't really the problem. It's absorption. I'll call it absorption. How do we, whether it's financial, intellectual, doctrinal, blending it with allies and coalition partners, that absorption, the pace of that, I think, is a challenge for us. So maybe that we'll have a chance to come back around to those questions if time permits. Sharps, I'd like to bring it back to you if you don't mind. You know, the theme of this is technology and partnerships for affordable capabilities of the future. And to that end, what is ACT and/or NATO doing to try to drive up partnerships with industry and academia to provide more affordable capabilities for the alliance? And that's affordability is certainly a challenge, and I think that's NATO is certainly sensitive to that. So I'd like to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, hey, thanks. First of all, you know, one of the things is Allied Command Transformation, right? It's a NATO headquarters here in the United States in Norfolk, Virginia. So I'm sure many people are surprised by that. People outside the gate sometimes don't even know there's NATO headquarters here, but it's in our name. Transformation. You know, we are chartered with trying to find those capabilities to ensure that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, marines, and guardians have the capabilities and tools they need before they need them. And so it's unique organizations that's looking to the future, seeing where we have today and what we need into the future. So it's in our name. And it's nested in the Secretary General's 2030, NATO 2030 document that'll be coming out this summer after the summit, which is founded upon, which innovation is at the heart of that. And what we do at Allied Command Transformation is we have built an innovation capability. When I first got here, it was an innovation hub partnered with Old Dominion University. We had 4 to 6 people that were connecting the academic, industry, and crowdsourcing to get ideas across the globe on things that we should be thinking about, what's going on, and an awareness. Well, since I've been here, we've now turned that hub into a lab, and we have 24 folks that go beyond just thinking about and talking about, but they're actually doing. We have coders, we have architects, we have design analysts with the operators in a room developing min viable products to get after some of those gaps that we have in military capabilities and connecting of the alliance so that we can do that. You know, I just spent an hour and a half this morning with General Harigian from an AirCom perspective to take the concepts of multi-domain, all domain, you know, sensor to shooter integration and breaking it down so that we can develop a flight path that goes into using innovative processes, DevSecOps, to start spiral developing to get after and solving what those problems are bit by bit. You don't eat the elephant, you eat it one bite at a time. And I think all of us are at that problem similarly. And that's what we're trying to do. Sorry, go ahead, Lee.
No, I was just thinking about eating that elephant one bite at a time. And in the case of the NATO construct, you know, there are many people at the table, all with a fork and a knife, and trying to decide who starts eating on what piece at what time takes some mastery of diplomacy.
Right. And so, and look, a lot of these wicked hard problems that we're talking about here, it's, you know, it's not just a single nation that's going to solve it. It's not just a single industry. It's how do we connect and leverage that intellectual rigor that everyone brings to the table to work together so that we're all rowing in the same boat at the same time. If not, you're going to go in a circle if you don't synchronize that effort. And that's what we're trying to do. We try and come up with, you know, what starts in science and technology, what's out there in industry, and then how do we connect them so that we fuse them together to bring a capability that benefits the nations, multi-nations, and then the euphoria would be benefits the alliance to provide a capability that gives us that military edge that's so important to support the Secretary General's 2030 ambition. And so we look for those pain points, we look for those problems based on the warfighter, and then we put, you know, not only the operators and the coders and the acquirers into the room to try and solve how we would do that and how we would do that faster, more agile, so that we can provide those capabilities cheaper, because that's always something I have to deal with in NATO, to make sure that nations understand what their investment is bringing and how it benefits not only their sovereignty, but then how it benefits, you know, the alliance, so that we can use it and deter any potential adversaries that wants to take us on. And the world is changing. I think that, you know, we've all talked about the pace of change, and if you don't innovate, then you're going to maintain where you're at. We can't do that. We got to go faster and farther. So in the chief's guidance that he gave out, I think there's a quote in here that Cadet Shepro used to make General Sharpy, Cadet Sharpy say, and it's, you know, it's Julio Duhay when he says, "Victory smiles upon those who anticipate the change in the character of war, not upon those who wait to adapt themselves after the change occurs." We can't wait. The world has changed, and we have to get after change now or lose. And that's what we're trying to do at ACT. We're trying to transform those capabilities so that they meet the future and connect the past to meet the future head on. And we need your help. And we're trying to leverage that with industry, with academia. You know, NATO in the past wasn't always, industry kind of shied away from that. We're trying to build that environment, that collaborative environment that we need industry, because they're leading in a lot of these areas. That, you know, as we talked about the acquisition process, we shouldn't use the same acquisition process to develop or deliver a seaport or a runway that we do to deliver software. And that's where we're looking for those opportunities and trying to get consensus to get those changes made that we have to do today. I'll stop because I could go on, but thanks for the time.
Absolutely. I think General Shinseki once said, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less. And there's a whole lot of truth in that. And absolutely, it's an imperative that we all face. And maybe at some point, if we also have the time, I'd like to circle back around to some of us, because Shep, I'm going to go to you next. But Marshall, you brought up the number of STEM workforce that you have and how you engage in the STEM arena. You know, to General Sharpy's point, if you want to go faster, you want to go funnier, and you want to go further, you need a highly trained workforce. And I think one of the things that hurts us in this arena is the STEM capabilities, and how do we drive that up? And so thank you for bringing that up. Shep, to that point about, the STEM workforce and the industrial base capabilities, I'm going to turn to you and, staying in that partnerships theme, Boeing, could you describe how they work to contribute to and grow and strengthen the industrial base? And are there any specific partnerships or collaboration initiatives that Boeing would want to bring up, or that you think has been maybe some special sauce that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. You said something important. You've said a lot of things important. The last one was that innovation is about adoption sometimes as much as it's about change. And Sharp's just tied that well by saying that we have to be able to connect past lessons with the future, right? Obviously, Cadet Sharpy has a long memory, and we have a long institutional memory too. And so this is where, again, Boeing is focused on, as we've looked at legacy systems, modern systems, and then our future systems, and where to draw upon. So I mentioned the global partnership to answer your question. So one thing we do is we look where we have pockets of innovation. There's an internal saying here that Boeing doesn't know what it knows, just because there's so many pockets of STEM research and excellence. And it's eye-watering to see some of the things we can do. You saw something 2 weeks ago, an example of that in Australia. Boeing Defence Australia flew the first ATS, it's Air Team System, UAV essentially, which is a very modular system that has a replaceable nose, and you can put any kinds of sensors in it and missionize it. And so the key now is, how do you missionize that? And how do you think 5th gen? What does 5th gen mean? And you've heard the chief talk about, we need to look at 5th gen minus as well as future systems. And why? Because everything has to be an enabler. Everything must enable everything to get to those decision loops and the importance of speed in those loops, as you talked about. And so we tap globally, and we listen to partners, and then we tap our expertise. And we have legacy expertise, which brings a lot of know-how, but we have a new digital generation as well, that we have to combine the two again to reach that bridge of past lessons and future. When we talk about NATO, I'm reminded of NATO's selection of the P-8, Maritime Patrol and Reconnaissance aircraft last year. And the P-8 as a platform isn't what is as important as P-8 as a network enabler, right? Its ability to connect with the NATO AWACS and the NATO Air Command and Control System that Sharps knows well, and these other pieces that make it a system. So Boeing as a company would be remiss not to connect these dots. It represents 1% of the US GDP, and it's a global network. So it has vast amounts of resources. 70% of that, by the way, goes to our domestic business partners, our supply base that you mentioned, Lee. That's an important piece as well. I'm glad you highlighted that. And they're in almost every state across the US and globally, like I said. So again, it comes back to the coordination piece and the ability to do it cohesively. So you network as a business, just like you got to network systems on the battlefield. And then you bring both the innovation and the adoption, the adaptation piece of that as well. I'll stop there.
That's great. And that kind of downward focus as well as upward focus on Boeing is really helpful. It's not lost on me that last year alone in the US DoD supply chain arena, over 5,000 companies exited DoD business. That's a problem for us as a nation, not only to make things, but to keep the things we make running when we want them, so they're there when we need them. And that industrial base and that supply chain, I think, is an essential component. And having that upwards and downwards connection is very helpful. So thank you for sharing that. Marshall, if you would, sir, tell me a little bit about how Aurora is contributing to the growth and strengthening of the industrial base. Is there anything unique in your corner of Aurora and of the Boeing family that is noteworthy of sharing?
Yes, thanks, Lee. I would like to compliment Sharps and Shep for setting the table at that global, that international level. And typical in my fashion, I'll dumb it down a little bit and take it down to the local level. So yes, speaking specifically about Aurora and about growth in the industrial base, let me just share a little vignette. Aurora started about, as I mentioned, about 30 years ago. It actually began with 2 MIT engineers that were working out of their garage. And it's grown today into a company of nearly 800 folks. That's part of the bigger Boeing team. And that Aurora team has expanded and diversified across the commercial, US government, and manufacturing sectors. We have offices in 4 states, Mississippi, West Virginia, in Virginia, and in Massachusetts. As I mentioned earlier, the Mississippi and West Virginia facilities, they specialize in aerospace, advanced aerospace structures and manufacturing. And at those plants, they currently manufacture metallic and composite airframe or airframe components for the Global Hawk, UAVs, the multiple helicopters like the CH-53, the S-92, the S-97, the CV-22, MH-60, and even the Gulfstream aircraft. So that's here and today. What I'd like to now look forward is investing in the future and to specifically take it to the STEM level. I recently had the opportunity to go to the Mississippi plant where I saw firsthand Aurora's long-term commitment to the US industrial base. In Columbus, Mississippi, our facility there, the team members not only make great aircraft components today, but they're paying it forward by investing in the human capital early and often. These Aurora teammates interest young men and women in science and technology by leading them in just simple things like local model rocket clubs. They have internships in their manufacturing facility. They advise and instruct students at the local community college. And for example, because of the strong relationship that Aurora has with what's called East Mississippi Community College, they've added class in robotics and composite manufacturing. And these EMCC grads bring these high-tech skills to employers around the region and the United States. We have similar partnerships and collaboration that builds the US industrial base at our facilities in West Virginia, and Massachusetts. I mentioned earlier that Aurora began 30 years ago, humble beginnings, a couple of MIT grads starting in the garage. This symbiotic relationship with MIT continues today. Dozens of MIT students intern at Aurora each year, and many grads eventually join our engineering teams. So in summary, I'd say that these Mississippi and Massachusetts examples show we are small but steady, paying it forward at Aurora, strengthening the US industrial base, specifically with a continuum of STEM ed outreach, whether it's at the elementary, middle, high school, 2-year, 4-year institutions, and across the communities. It takes place every day. It happens at the local level. And because of this investment, I think, in our human capital, tomorrow's graduates are going to go on to become those skilled technical engineers and manufacturing employees that will greatly benefit the US industrial base and ultimately our warfighters in any high-end fight, whether that fight is today or tomorrow. I'll stop there and look forward to continue to participate. Really great discussion. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Marshall. So a couple of key points. The conversation I used to share with community leaders is how long does it take to produce a STEM graduate? And a lot of them would say 4, maybe 5 years if you were on the 5-year program like I was. They say, yeah, 4, maybe 5 years. And I say, no, really, it's about 21 years because somebody has to have that child and then get them through the K-12 system to get them into an engineering or STEM program and then get them through a STEM program before we collectively in the national security apparatus see them as available for work. And that's a long lead time item is that STEM talent. And it's something that all of us, I think, certainly see as a vulnerability where we have really high demand and relatively small supply for our nation's needs. And that's not just from a national security perspective, that's an economic conversation as much as a national security conversation. Erin, I'm going to pivot back to you and ask you a couple of questions, if you don't mind. And I'll give you a warning order now. I think I'm going to deviate from the script just a wee bit from some of the
That's
things that
fine.
we have, because I would hate to miss the opportunity to tap into some of your experience. And I'm going to start with the one that we didn't talk about in advance. And I'd like to tap into your time on the Hill and maybe ask you, what are your thoughts about, given the chief's comments and given what all of us have felt during our time in uniform, we all collectively know there are things we need to jettison out of the inventory. And I guess if you had a bunch of Army or Navy or Marine Corps leaders on the line right now, they would say something somewhat similar. Yet we constantly get caught in a bit of a circular argument about funding modernization by retiring legacy platforms, and we never seem to get there. Any insights onto a way, given the fiscal environment we're in right now, and we're likely to be in the near future, how we might be able to accelerate that and really move us to step change as opposed to maybe an evolutionary change?
Sure. I wish I had a magic answer. When I was under myself and Vice Chief Breedlove, we met, I think we did 9 Saturdays in a row through the summer with Bud Wyatt, who at the time was Chief of the National Guard, Air National Guard, and oh my God, my brain. The head of the Air Force Reserve, whose name is going to come back to me in just a second, and please God forgive me, because they were such excellent partners. And we were primarily focused on retiring the A-10 at the time, but we were trying to get rid of some older fighters as well, in order to make room for new capabilities coming in. And we managed to find follow-on missions for every single Guard unit out there and every single reserve unit out there. In many cases, units with far more longevity. Now, it was not a match of fighter to fighter, which, was disappointing. I totally understood for many of the Guard units. In some cases, it was cyber, which is going to be an enduring mission for many, many years. In some cases, it was intel, but we, and God bless General Wyatt and God bless many of the tags, very few of whom were Air Force tags. There were many are Army tags, and I don't need to tell this panel the debate about the A-10 between the Army and the Air Force. And we were ultimately not successful on the Hill, despite being able to show, that there was something coming in behind that was going to provide, follow-on mission. And some of it, candidly, was that the particular people in those units who were, fighter pilots, were interested in continuing to fly. And I know I've got some fighter pilots on the panel who might be able to speak to that. And, it's hard. You're running up against emotional issues here. And I think both General Breedlove and I tried to be extraordinarily sensitive to that, as did the chief and the secretary at the time. But when you get to issues of hardware and you get to issues like the firefighting capability that goes with fighters that also serves municipal and other airports where these units are based, we did not have very much luck. And that was not for an extraordinary effort. I mean, I can't tell you the number of hours we put into trying to make this work. And I don't want to cast aspersion on the Guard in any way, shape, or form, or the Congress. They just looked at it from a completely different perspective. So I'll be interested to see what's in this budget request, because you have to keep going back and trying, and you have to keep trying to make these cases. But there are definitely sympathizers on the Hill. I mentioned Chairman Smith. I think he understands that in a flat budget environment, and he's not the only one, and he's certainly not the only one on both sides of the aisle. I just happen to point to him because he happens to be chairman, who do understand this, but it's very difficult when you're dealing with a home unit and those who have flown for their country for many years who want to continue to fly, who don't necessarily want to transition into a cyber role or hang up their flight suits for good. So I wish I could be extraordinarily optimistic on the hardware side. I think on the legacy systems, on the IT modernization side, I'm a little bit more optimistic because there's not as much emotion that hangs around those capabilities. There, it's a matter of some of the things we talked about earlier in terms of policies and acquisition and just kind of syncing up what's coming in with what's going out. And, that's also hard. It gets tied up in the audit, issues that are, have been plaguing us for many years as well. But I know you want to hit a couple other issues. Is that a good enough? I feel like I feel like I just stepped in deep doo-doo with a whole bunch of constituencies right here, but including the fighter pilot community. But that's an honest answer. That's the best I can do for you.
Well, thank you for taking that question. I think
Yeah.
the reason I wanted to share that is it is an incredibly difficult challenge, and I think most people don't really understand it. To the outside observer, it looks very, it's a kind of a 1 or 0.
Why don't you do this?
Yeah, why?
Right?
Yeah, this is a simple decision.
It's
Why
so
don't I do
obvious,
this?
right?
But it's not. I mean, this affects the health of our communities in many ways.
Does.
It affects our national warfighting capability in many ways. And some would argue it's somewhat of an artifact of a military that's gotten too small for the infrastructure it has.
Right.
And now you're trying to square that circle over and over, and it's an unsatisfying outcome no matter how you slice it.
And I do worry, and again, this goes back, to my time representing the Air Force when we would have debates inside the building and we talked about the high-end fight, be it with China or Russia or whomever the potential adversary might be, when different parts of the building didn't account for things like combat losses, somehow just imagined that, the F-35 would allow us to go without any combat loss. And I said, well, we're great, but the idea that we're going to get through an A2AD environment without a single combat loss seems unrealistically optimistic to me. Are we building in force structure that accounts for the need to sustain through a longer term fight? But that's a whole different conversation. And I know you want to keep us on track, so I'll leave it there.
Thanks. Indeed, the adversary definitely gets a vote.
Absolutely.
And we should never fail to factor that in to our planning. And I think sometimes we're all collectively guilty of that from time to time. So speaking of time, we will go. We will run out of it if we're not careful. So I think and I want to be mindful of yours. So I think what I'd like to do now is move to just a minute or two of closing remarks from each of you. And I'll let you share what's on your mind or in your heart or whatever you think is valuable to the audience as we wrap this session up. Sharps, you're the first one out of the chute, so I'll give you a chance to start our taking us down the home stretch.
Yeah, so Murphy's Law, right? I had my computer said I had 5 minutes to reboot, and it rebooted. So flexibility is key to air power. So we went to the backup and look at that at work. So, hey, first, thanks for the opportunity. It's great to see old friends. It's great to see Leader Secretary Conotan. It's great to see you again. It's great to have this dialogue and debate. I don't think we do it enough. I think that for those listening out to there, just take away that the world is changing. What used to be departments, used to be, governments that are solving those hard, complex problems. That's not the case today. We need to partner with industry. We need to partner with academia. We need to partner with our science and technology brothers and sisters to bring all of us together to be able to leverage the strides that they are making individually, and then collectively bring that together for a nation, for a group of nations, or for my case, for what NATO brings to the table. Because it's, if we don't, taking second place doesn't help any of us. And so it's not just about our individuals, companies, corporations, it's about the whole of it, what we're doing. And that's why I'm excited to do what I do for the Alliance. The world, that change is happening faster than it's ever happened before. And if we don't innovate and we don't transform and we don't change, like I said, taking second place is not an option. So we got to figure out how to do that. We try and do that here at ACT, but we're not doing it alone. We're doing it with 30 nations, but then the brunt of the Alliance, the strength of the Alliance, is the access they have to all those organizations that support those nations. And I'm glad to be a part of it. But we need to, ask those hard questions. Secretary Conotan, you brought up some wicked hard problems. How do we together solve them, right? How do we come together and solve them? And how do we find ways, instead of just focusing on the problem, find ways to solve it, right? And you're not going to solve it all at once, but I believe if we start small, we'll grow big, especially as you talk about some of the digitalization of data, the sensor to shooter integration that we're all admiring. We got to figure out how we do that. And working with industry and our partners is the only way that I know how to do that. And we need to focus, I think the why is there. We know the why. I need help to figure out how. And what I heard today, Shep and Marshall and Lee and Secretary, it's out there. We just got to figure out how we do it together and bring that, all those disparate ideas, all those disparate solutions together to do that how. And I think if we do that, not only will we be a better nation, we'll be a better alliance, and we won't have to worry about, deterrence can work if we show the capability to do so. And that's my goal, right? I grew up in SAC. Peace is my profession. I don't want to ever have to use it. And if we can do this together, we won't have to. I'll stop there, Lee. Thanks for the opportunity. Good to see old friends. Shep, you look magnificent. Marshall, good to see you. And Secretary, thanks for your solving those wicked hard problems for us.
Thanks, Sharps. It's great to be with you. Secretary, you're next on our closing. So I'd like to get a moment or two of your thoughts on how we continue to move the conversation forward.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing that everybody's got to be part of the conversation. Not having seen the budget, I can't say how many stakeholders that is. It certainly involves our allies, as Sharps just mentioned. But Congress has to be part of that conversation. There's a lot of new members, and I think the chief has and the acting secretary have done a great job at trying to begin that dialogue. Whoever the new secretary is will be part of that conversation too. The other thing I guess I would just like to say, because I think both Marshall and Shep have done a great job of talking to what Boeing and Aurora have done. I guess I'd like to speak a little bit, just briefly, on behalf of the small to medium-sized innovators out there, because I'm working with a lot of them in my current capacity, which is just to say that there are so many smaller companies out there who are bringing new capabilities to the fight. And sometimes it's, pointy end of the spear kind of stuff. And sometimes it's things like bringing molecules in a box that can create new medicines on the fly and can be deployed on a ship, or can be deployed with a Marine unit or an Army unit or an Air Force unit. Innovation comes in all kinds of ways, shapes, and forms. And some of what we're trying to do is to educate the broader community, and it's where things like AFWorks, I really just want to give a big shout out to AFWorks and their equivalents across the joint fight for finding the small and medium-sized companies that are working with the primes and with the services out there. And I think I'll leave it on that, on a positive note, that there's innovation happening all across our community in ways large and small. Thanks,
Thank you.
Lee.
Thanks a ton. And, Aurora, who, started in somebody's garage and now look what they've become.
Exactly.
That's the model.
That's it. That is the model. There's no limit to where they can go.
And that's really the key to our, many of the innovations and the kind of capabilities we as a nation bring economically, societally, and certainly in the national security space. Shep, over to you for a few closing remarks, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I can only echo, those great comments. First, great to see you, Secretary Sharps, Marshall, and everybody who's online. We always talk about taking time to think. And what we've reiterated, though, is that it's not just taking time to think, but it's thinking together and attacking assumptions as well. I think the Secretary got to that. We're starting to talk more about sustainability and what's affordable. And mass is still important. Quantity has a quality all of its own. So, it's important to define the words we're talking about, like legacy. So legacy is one of those words getting thrown around since we brought that up. There was a recent Defense News article that was quite illuminating that said, legacy we should think of as its contribution to current great power competition. It's not just a thing, right? It's the capability it brings. It's the networking, it's the payload. That's what's important. And so, we're having those discussions more. And then I'll just end on, what Erin said. We have to partner among industry as well. Sharp's underlined partnering with military and industry. That's key. We got to think of it as a partnership, but we got a partnership. We have to partner in industry as well. And for Boeing, Marshall and Aurora represent that, right? And Secretary said it better than I could. Boeing saw a pocket of genius, and the head of that organization, Mark Cherry, of course, was brought in and became the head of Phantom Works for Boeing, and now is the head of Vertical Lift. He brings both genius and diversity. And so this is important for the future. You see defense industry consolidating, but it's not just about consolidating and then taking pieces, but it's about really incorporating the genius. And so once again, glad to be on the panel. And on that note, glad to hand it over to Marshall.
Great. Thanks. Marshall, over to you to take us home.
Okay, well, hopefully let me start by saying thank you again. I can't say thanks enough to the great team of panelists. Rhino, you've been very generous on us, and so thank you again on behalf of all of us. As Shep mentioned, I'll pile on. Yes, we live in interesting times, challenging times, great power competition. But personally, I'm glad I'm on our side, and quite frankly, I like our chances. Reflecting back on former Secretary Colin Powell, General Colin Powell, one of his leadership mantras was perpetual optimism as a force multiplier. You think about our soldier sailors, former soldier sailors, airmen, Marines, coasties, guardians, international partners, those have gone before, those who are serving now, and those who serve in the future. Boy, what a great partnership. And we serve a noble cause. Some of humanity's highest ideals in terms of freedom and democracy. And it's not pretty, sometimes we have some tough conversations, but because of those high ideals, we were able to have those open, candid conversations and ultimately come up with the best solution. So I like our chances. Yes, we live in tough times, but boy, I'm glad I'm on our side. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Lee.
Brilliant. What a great way to wrap us up. Thank you very much for you really put a perfect bow on the conversation. Thanks to all of you, not only for your service and your leadership, but more importantly, your continued leadership in our nation. That's why I like our chances. It's people like you, people like the folks that America Future Series brings into these kinds of conversations. That's what makes us that shining city on the hill. And it was great to spend time with all of you today. Thank you for making time and carving it out to do this for us and for America's Future Series. And speaking of America's Future Series, I see David and Scott back on the screen. So I think with that, I'll pass it back to the studios of Murray Media and say my farewells and again, reiterate my thank yous. Out here.
Boy, they are rock stars personified. Great job, group. Outstanding group.
I like my chances with them.
Oh, boy, that was phenomenal.
That's great.
Yeah, it really was.
I've watched a lot of these for about 11 years now.
Mhm.
We've been bringing on thought leaders who care about U.S. global competitiveness and national security, who have only amplified. I think it's the pace of it is a lot of these messages have been the same for a long time.
Mhm.
But the impetus for it, the why, as Sharpy was talking about, the why clearly, I think we all understand, is America must remain the strongest military, political, and economic power in the world, or it is a bad day for everyone.
Absolutely.
We cannot give that mantle over to the Chinese or the Iranians or the Venezuelans or the Russians or anybody else. The United States and its allies, and we all agree that it is not America alone, or even America first. It's America together. That together we're stronger.
Mhm.
So I like my chances, as General Dillon said, if we do that. And General Sharpy's point about the how is really important to me personally. For us to do this, we have to talk about the hows. How do we actually make this happen? To simply say that it's important over and over and over again is completely insufficient. Okay. We have to focus on the hows. And ultimately, all of this innovation discussion, this technology discussion, is a leadership discussion. It is a culture and a values discussion. It's a lot like your Leadership America program that you run. If we don't focus people on the right things, if we don't empower them, if we don't change how people are compensated and rewarded, how do you get promoted? Is it by taking no risk, or is it by taking risk? Is it by encouraging risk in others? For example, one of the hows, the specific hows that I've heard a number of times recently that I really agree with is all of the high potential leaders that we have need to do a tour with one of these innovation groups. They need to do a stint with AFWorks or SoftWorks or DIU or SoftWorks, any of these groups, Army Applications Lab, Naval X.
Never thought of that, but that's easily done.
Yeah. So as part of your rotation,
Mhm.
if we're grooming you for higher
Great
office,
idea.
better to be promoted, then to work in those worlds is really important to have experienced that, because that becomes part of your culture.
Absolutely.
You carry that, you become a disciple of it. Secondly, just being more efficient, driving out. They talked about cost and mass and quality, et cetera. I'm an old Lean Six Sigma quality guy, right? And if you
Right.
don't have your master black belt or black belt, go get one. But meaning, don't get a piece of paper on an online thing, but do projects that drive cost and inefficiency out, change processes, be a change agent.
Mhm.
And however you need to go about doing that, we ultimately, I think the thing that we prize, one of the elements that we have to prize above others, not just leadership and grit and integrity and all the other things that the military focuses on, but this being a change agent, being unafraid to take risk and to fail and allow others to. And as was said earlier in the day, to be the leader that was willing to take the blame for that, to give the credit to somebody else or share it with
Right,
somebody else,
right.
and also be willing to take if that culture drives everything. Culture drives everything. Values, what you value, what you care about, et cetera. So if we do nothing else, if we cause a conversation where people say, I am now emboldened, I'm empowered, I am going to empower others to take risk, et cetera. We're going to collaborate more. We're going to partner more between. I loved hearing Boeing saying, we can't just, say between us and the military. It's got to be between us. They have to partner with other companies.
Right.
And we're early with other countries, many of whom may not speak English, as the general said. So I'm sorry to preach a little bit, but I'm really passionate about this. This is why we exist. And we would love to have more people come on and talk about the how.
I love it. I love what you said. And forget the confrontation. Let's come together with conversation. And exactly what you just said. And it seems so simple how you just explained it. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Why don't we do it more often?
Yeah, and
let's make it happen.
And so, again, as the general said, as General Dillon said, I like my chances if we do these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it can be done. Right. It can.
So we're going to take about a 5-minute break now.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll take about 5 minutes and lots more to come. We're going to be here today and again tomorrow. So we thank you much for being a part of which we hope will be most informative as we continue with our America's Future Series Defense Innovation Summit. So don't go away. We're coming back in 5.